For our session 12, I began with this arrangement of Homer's Iliad to get us into talking about numbers and the way the writers of the New Testament texts used numbers to help them in their works in relation to the needs of their readers. We looked at structure as we found it here, A, B, B prime, an introductory part, a first development, a second development that mirrors the first development and completes a whole of three parts, a turning point, X, and a further succession of three parts, A, B and B prime, which mirror this for structure, and we went through this for contents. It's the nearest thing to writing style as well that what has opened up to me and to my research is that all the New Testament writers use this three-part writing method. Homer uses what's called dactylic hexameter. If this is dactylic ABB prime, it comes from finger, and that's the A part, that's the B part, and that's the B prime part. So in Morse code it might be da, di, di, in terms of syllables. So there'd be 6 of these in a line, basic to dactylic hexameter, the way of writing, use of writing style of Homer to convey his poetic presentation. The nearest way that they could get to this, I think, in writing, appears to be dactylic triameter. In other words, when we look at a text, it is three-part writing built up of three-part writing, which is again built up of three-part writing, and even other levels, literary levels like that. And I've discovered up to about 6 or 7 of these different levels of writing where we can make sense of what a unit of text is. The problem with earlier scholarship is that no one has been able to define systematically and with great discipline what is a unit of text. We've been thrashing around for centuries, really doing our best and reading subjectively. We turn over the page and look at the writing that I first explored as I wanted to take further some earlier studies of mine on Mark's Gospel and on its structure. And looking around at the Greek in the opening chapter, I saw that there was the potential for seeing an opening number of verses, 20 verses, panning out into 3 parts: an A part, a B part, and a B prime part. It shortened to verses 2 to 20 after a few years of research and continued looking at this for the discipline of the writing. Kathoski graptai, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, the first 3 lines, when you parse the text, if you've studied Latin or Hebrew in the past, you were encouraged to parse a sentence. It never made much sense to me why we should parse a sentence, having to describe grammatically, syntactically, each and every part of that sentence, the clauses that it made up the sentence and the phrases that made up the clauses and the words and their value in grammatical terms. It's knowing all that that allows us to parse a text. So that's parsing with a purpose. Because you understand the grammar and understand reading the language, you can split it into its parts and its pieces, and therefore establish its wholes. So in the opening piece, kathos gegraptai en to Isaiah to prophete, here is a part as it is written, and that's a part. In Isaiah, that's a part. The prophet. It could have just read as it is written in Isaiah. It didn't need this word, but the writer puts it in. So it's actually three parts: an opening, first development, and second development. And so we can go through the whole text in that way. Behold, and I am sending my messenger before your face, who will prepare the way of you. So it's a succession. What I produce on the next page is a literal translation in English of these Greek words in their succession, and I identify three parts that make up this three-part opening whole. So each part has its part to play in the whole, but that establishes what the writer wants, and then he says egeneto Ioannes, and here we get kai ein ho Ioannes, and for the first time we get the name of this one who's preparing the way for the coming of someone greater, and we get the three-part telling of each of these. So let's just do this. My proposal was that we saw an opening introductory part, a first development in the second, and a second development that reflected on this to complete the threefold approach of writing. So this would express writing style, just as this would express writing style, but as you can see it's a very small part of the whole. Three parts to one, so we would say this is introductory, this is the first development, egeneto Ioannes, and kaien Ioannes is the second and completing development to the opening piece. So introduction, John, first development, second development, beginning with John. The same appears in the middle, in the second and the third pieces. So how they work is kai geneto en ekkenes tes HOMER'S ilad Jesus, and we get method paradothenai ton Ioannein ilad ho Jesus, came Jesus into Galilee, from Nazareth here, in Galilee, of Galilee. So they mirror each other, and they say this is the first development of this, and this is the second development that relates to this. And in its three parts, we have kai egeneto, and it came to pass in those days, came Jesus, and immediately, kaiuthos. Now, we haven't got these words prior to this. These are words that are used a lot in the Gospel, but this is the opening, this is the prologue. And here we find an A part, a B part, and a B prime part. You may be seeing this in the Greek. That's why I've opened with it. So comes Jesus, this is following the imprisonment of John, and preaching the gospel of God and saying. And this is introductory, and going along by the Sea of Galilee, he sees Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon. And all of these are pieces, A, B, B prime, A, B, B prime. And this is A, B, B prime, at that different literary level. First development, second development, I beg your pardon, A, B, B prime. We have another kaiuthos here, but it's not relating to these. it's relating to this. And he said to them, Jesus, come after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. And immediately, leaving the nets, they followed him. So that is action that takes place in response to the call. We'll see it, but in a moment, after we've just completed, going along a little bit by the Sea of Galilee, and then going a little further, he sees two more brothers who are fishermen, and he calls them, and in answer, and immediately he called them, and leaving the father. So that replicates this, and leaving the nets, they followed him. And so we have complete wholes in themselves, and each part can be seen as a whole, but we have layers. So we identify a writing style as A, B, B prime, but that's first level. Second level, A, B, B prime. Third level, A, B, B prime. Fourth level, A, B, B prime. A, B, B prime, A, B, B prime. Does it go beyond that? Not here, but elsewhere it does. And it goes from 4 literary levels to 6 and 7 in the narrative. With that said, old scholarship that doesn't know how to read the Greek text and doesn't do parsing, and therefore gain from the writers indicators to the reader that are there in the Greek. It's such disciplined writing. This is not difficult. It stands out. It's not been seen before. A rigour for reading the Greek text, so that it reads itself as verses 2 to 20. The first part is a title. It describes the title, beginning Arche tu Evangeliu Jesu Christu, beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ. That is the overall title to this drama. The introduction, the prologue, is this 3 parts, and it's not therefore chapter 1 verses 1 to 13, which just about all the major commentaries say, nor is it 1 to 15, as some did say. It's near to one that said it was 1 to 20. He was looking at the Gospel from a sociological point of view. It does help knowing that the first of 4 series of 7 days begins at chapter 1 verse 21. That's what got me looking at this text, this part of the whole text. And of course this new scholarship that's based on a rigorous objective reading of the text, because we can say, just as we can with Psalm 119, we can all agree how that psalm is structured. It's an acrostic in the Hebrew. It covers 8 lines every letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And everybody can determine, can say what that scheme is, because there's an objectivity to it. Nobody is thinking, it reveals itself in the Hebrew writing. Just as this reveals itself and declares this is the prologue to Mark's Gospel, and not what has been said before. Here it is in literal English, and you'll be glad about that, I guess. I struggled a little bit to get you to this point. So the 3 parts, as it has been written in Isaiah the prophet, there came to pass John, and there was John. And it came to pass in those days came Jesus, and immediately this happened, and immediately this happened. And after the imprisonment of John came Jesus into Galilee, and passing along beside it he calls 2, and going forward he calls 2, and there is the whole rhythm of a prologue that well sets us to hear the narrative that then follows. So you won't be surprised to learn that there's a way of looking at the longer ending of Mark's Gospel to find something of a balancing prologue to this that is just as which we clearly created to do a job as an epilogue as this is so clearly created to perform as a prologue. Why certain scholars and commentators have said Jesus calling of disciples is not part of the program, I'll never really know, because it's so clear in the rest of the narrative that Jesus is about sharing the load, if you like, of establishing the kingdom of God on earth, which is one of the major themes of this gospel. Moving on from Mark's gospel, what was very clear was that there was something quite close to this in John's Gospel and chapter 1 to verses 1 to 18. And not least because we get in the English, literal English, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, we've come across this before already in this series, logos, theon, and the two words are swapped around in the parallel line. So enarche, as with Mark's Gospel, arche, beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, we have this word arche, but in the beginning, and of course that takes you back to Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, and deliberately, so we're being taken somewhere else in different to that place we were taken in the prologue of Mark, of course. We're taken back to the beginning of time. So, enarche ein ho logos, kai ho logos ein pros ton theon, kai theos ein ho logos. And it's clearly a three-part whole. Look in the New International Version, and they add hutos ein arche pros ton theon in the opening paragraph. So the translators carry the burden, I'm afraid, of our failure to read the text today in the way that the writers intended, where they think they are just translating words, but they're not. Well, they are, but they should have been translating collections of words. They should have been doing the parsing of the text. I think what many have done have read the Greek texts and trusted that those who put capital letters and full stops to sentences and left indentations or lines for paragraph division have never questioned those editors of the Greek texts that are around the world, different from each other in style and in words and approach in many instances. So the indiscipline began when, as Augustine despaired, so soon as a churchman in the 1st and 2nd centuries received a copy of the New Testament in Greek, and they did in that period, maybe towards the end of the 2nd century, whether or not they were capable, they translated from the Greek into Latin. So much harm was done. Ways of translating were not understood, so that Caiaphas, twice over, they might have said, I can't say that twice. So instead of and immediately, soon after, this happened. So they changed the wording. There's no consistency to the translating. No understanding that they need to be parsing the text as they go. So this was in the beginning with God. Is the second part to the whole. The first development. So enarche ein ho logos, in the beginning was the Word. This was in the beginning with God. All things through him became, and without him became not one thing that became. So there's our middle, our second part and first development, and here is the third part, the B prime part. In him was life, and life was the light, and the light in the darkness shines, and the darkness it has not comprehended, not understood. And that's our third part, where Jesus is seen as the life and light of God in the world. And that's where we certainly link with the seven-branched lampstand again, for the rabbinical understanding that the lampstand, as it stood next to the table of the bread of the presence in the tabernacle, later the temple of course, stood for the life and light of God in the world. Here the writer is saying Jesus is the life and light of God in the world now. He has made God known to us. And this is just the first stanza. The second builds up on light. I'll turn over in a moment. And so there came to pass a man sent from God, named to him John. And opposite this, and the word flesh became. Yes? I'm going to turn over. So John's witness comes here. John gets a mention by name here, here and here. So an A part that doesn't mention him, but a B part that does, and a B prime part. This prologue is disclosing that John has come as a witness. The next whole piece speaks of his testimony, but the prologue does the introducing of what's to come and what's to follow quite suddenly. So in three parts we have the simplest, and I think that's something worth pointing out. It couldn't be that much more simple than this. It's as though the writer is saying to the reader, do you get me? Do you get what I'm saying? There's going to be more of this, but when he gets to the B part, he's saying it will be a bit more complicated than that. It's growing, all right? But he's gently leading the reader in to reading his text in three parts of three parts. So again, we have level one. Yes, it is a level one, literally, in literary terms, the prologue. Level two, the three parts. Level three, this part, and this part. Level four, this part. And when we get over here, we can see a bigger breakdown. So simplified, growing in complexity, established complexity, but A, B, B prime parts. Let's turn over and see it in its literal English. And there has been so much debate about this prologue, whether or not it was an earlier hymn. All those arguments go out the window because we can see it in its context in the gospel, but see it for the syntax by which it's constructed. So I put here the main parts as they begin on that line and continue, and then as they are on each line, and as they appear still at greater level, a more detailed level. All right, and there it is throughout. So in him life was, and the life was the light, and the light in the darkness shines, and the darkness this did not understand. You can say it's pedantic, but it's about reading it in basic terms, and then it's for the presenter to give the embellishment, not to change the words, but to give the breathing and the presentation in the way they best interpret what they read in a disciplined way. This is only the beginning of interpreting and understanding a text. these were my ways in, my introduction into parsing, not for the sake of testing my knowledge of the grammar and syntax, but rather through knowing the grammar and the syntax, putting the limits to the parts and seeing how the pieces relate to the parts, really relate to the wholes. It's beautiful writing. It's worth us spending just that little bit more on. After the introduction, there was a man sent from God, named to him John. This man came for testimony, that he might testify concerning the light, that all men might believe through him. Was not that man the light, but that he might testify concerning the light. You can see that it's poetic, and it's taking time to present with clarity. It was the true light which enlightens every man coming into the world. In the world he was, and the world through him became, linking here, and the world him knew not. To his own he came, and his own him received not. Woe and sadness here. But as many as received him, look at the difference, but how they relate is so powerful. But as many as received him, he gave to them authority, children of God to become. To the ones believing in the name of him, who not of bloods, nor of will of flesh, nor of will of a man, but of God were born. It's stirring stuff. And it's beautifully written, beautifully told. And the word, and this is it, isn't it? Reading stopped there in church. That's thought to be enough. But it cannot stop there. We must have the whole. It does great injustice to the writer if we begin in the wrong place and end in the wrong place. You know, we have to read the whole in its three parts. Everything has to be included. We can't stop there or here, where many readings do. And the word flesh became and dwelt among us, and we beheld the glory of him, glory as of an only one from a Father, full of grace and truth. John testifies through him, named here, and he has cried out, saying, "This man was he of whom I said, the one after me coming, before me has become, because first of me he was." Okay, it needs disentangling for our English ears, but it's there, the words are there, and the sentiment is expressed. Because of the fullness of him, we all received, and grace for grace, there's an idiom there, but I kept it, and grace for grace, because the law through Moses was given, the grace and the truth through Jesus Christ became. Look how his name is introduced with his title. He's the Anointed One, completing the opening prologue. We're not talking about any insignificant person here. We're talking about somebody who's of Moses' likeness. Look back to what Matthew had to say about, in terms of historiing the birth of Jesus, linking it to the story of the birth of Moses. And now see the contrast that John's seeing here and transmitting. Because the law through Moses was given, the grace and the truth through Jesus Christ became, using the word that we've got up here, without him nothing became that was became. And the final bit of this part is, God no man has seen, never. Well, it says that in the Greek, and it means ever, okay, in the second line. The only born God, the one being in the bosom of the Father, that one has made him known. And literally you could say that one made declaration. It bothers me that beautiful poetic parts of the texts of the New Testament have been manipulated by translators who haven't understood what the writers were first of all trying to say before they thought they could improve the texts for the reading and listening public for today. Yes, texts have to work in different contexts today, as in reading in church, as one reads and everybody listens, or in a Bible study group where all have their open Bibles and their study Bibles and all pitch in with translations of every kind. But let's hear it in the rhythm of the pieces and be honest in our reading of the text. What I'm going to do in the following section is to take you to various places in the New Testament texts where I think you'll be surprised to find such clarity of this A, B, B prime writing style. So don't go away, come back for session 14.